Can you hear me? Ooh. Welcome. Anybody's first time here? Okay, well, it's about time you got here. Thank you for coming. So I'm just going to do a little housekeeping first. I've got now a script, which I've never had before. I've been doing this for 5 years. Now I have a script. The bathroom is out the hall and down to your left. And please turn off your cell phones or silence them. There's water back there for you to drink if you need it. And after Frederick talks, his books and films will be available for purchase in the back. Okay? So about the Oddfellows. This is Ocean View Lodge 143, chartered April 18th, 1868. So we've been around for a while. We are one of the town's oldest organizations. We're dedicated to improving our community based on our values and guiding principles of friendship, love, and truth. Our events, like tonight, are fundraisers for our scholarship, for our youth services programs, which include scholarships to high school students and community college students. Also for donations to foster care and women's shelter organizations and volunteering throughout our community. In the last few years alone, we've donated more than $50,000 to local charities, thanks to events like this one tonight. So we are 112 people doing good and having fun. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube if you're interested, okay? We have concerts, films, and speakers. Later this month, we have a fabulous film called Water for Life about Indigenous water rights. It won the Audience Award at the Mill Valley Film Festival. Next month, I believe we are going to show Vertigo, the Alfred Hitchcock classic. In March, we're showing an amazing film about aging called I Like It Here. So please, if you're not on the mailing list, get on the mailing list so you can come, because we also have speakers and concerts and dances and all kinds of other cool things. So thank you for coming tonight. I am going to introduce our wonderful speaker. Frederick Marks is a speaker, writer, and Academy and Emmy Award nominated filmmaker, best known for Hoop Dreams, named Best Documentary of All Time by the International Documentary Association. He's been making films, writing books and blogs, and giving speeches for nearly 30 years about rites of passage. Tonight, we're excited to hear him talk about how experiencing and recognizing rites of passage, from cultural traditions like weddings to events that arise at any age in the course of being human, like the death of someone close, can contribute to successful life transitions. So thank you, Frederick.
Thank you, Gail. Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming tonight, and delighted to see you all here. I guess the room is really warming up now, isn't it? Because, yeah, I had my jacket on because I was freezing up until a few minutes ago. So, and before I start, I confess to not particularly wanting to wear this. My voice is pretty loud generally, and for a small room like this, I really don't need amplification. But we are filming it, so we thought for higher quality sound that it would be best for me to wear the mic. So you're stuck with it. So thank you, Gail, not only for the introduction, but it's thanks to Gail's recommendation that I'm here tonight. And I also want to do a shout out to somebody I assume a lot of you will know, Gary Warhaftig, who he's a friend of mine, and he was the first person to invite me to come here when I gave a talk some 5, 6, 7 years ago. I can't remember when. It was lost in the pre-COVID expanse of time. But I was here, And at that time, I was talking about my vision for a film called Veterans Journey Home. And here I am, X number of years later, and it's not only a film, it's 5 films. As these things will grow, this grew and became a 5-film series. And I'm going to show you a little clip from one of those films tonight. But I'm just curious, though, were any of you here then at that time? Oh, okay, cool. Great. And you were here too, Gil? Oh, awesome. Okay. We had a vet here also that night. Well, I assume actually many of you. You're a vet as well? Oh, awesome. Okay, well, welcome. So, yes. So I have actually a few DVDs from that series in the back. If you're old-fashioned like me and still watch DVDs. And as well as Gail mentioned, a number of my books. So it really is a privilege for me tonight to be here to talk about my passion, what I love, Rites of Passage. And it really has been my obsession for just about 30 years now. It's reflected in much of the reading that I've done, certainly a lot of the experiential work that I've done over the last 30 years, workshops and life experience. And also, I've been extremely privileged to have extraordinary conversations with some of the people who I consider to be world leaders in this subject area of rites of passage. And a lot of them, well, some of them you'll see very shortly in one of my films. In fact, my guess is a lot of you already know Michael Meade. He's certainly a pillar of this work. But you'll find in my book quotes from filmed interviews that I've done with these people for almost 30 years. And if you're an audiobook lover, you might really like the audiobook because I took their own voices from the film interviews and I put them into the audiobook. So it's a very rich stew of all of these amazing, brilliant people from around the world with all of their own accents from New Zealand, Australia, Europe, Africa, Asia, as well as, of course, the US, along with their own idiosyncrasies of speech. So I like to think of it as more of an audio documentary, really. So I really recommend the audiobook. So let me start by just saying, I want to tell you sort of where I'm going and why it's important, I think, that we all come to a deeper familiarity with rites of passage and what it means. And for me, and I just suddenly got quieter. No, it's fine. I'm sure you can hear me regardless. You're good, Blake. Thank you. I would just suggest look around. One of the things that is most painful to me personally about the state of the world as it exists today is that we've lost a sense of the sacred. We've lost that sense that so much of the meaning of what it is to be a human being on this planet is of insignificance. And we've lost a deep sense of what it means to be human and to be in deep relationship with other people. We've lost a deep sense of what it is to be in deep relationship with the natural world, the world that sustains and holds all of us and nourishes all of us with this unending abundance. And I think that we've lost a sense of the preciousness of every moment, that in this lifetime we're gifted with our consciousness in order to be fully aware and appreciative of how unique an opportunity it is to be human and aware and awake for our lives. And in some ways it sounds like a terrible commonplace to say something like that. It's like, duh. But it also, it seems to me to be rarely spoken to, and also kind of there's sort of shrinking horizons of possibility there when it comes to understanding and appreciating the precious sacredness of our human lives. And then that's not even to mention community. You know, how well are our communities functioning? Well, I'd be inclined to say this one's functioning pretty well. You're all here tonight, and you have this beautiful facility and this beautiful community. God bless you. That's wonderful. It's great. But, you know, so many others in the world do not have functional community, really. Or if they do, I mean, and many of us, let's face it, it's a plural. We have different communities, right, that we're part of. And so many of them are online these days, which is fine. You know, it's a wonderful thing. And it also has limitations. We lose that sense of physical contact with each other by engaging with each other in the online world. So my sense of Rites of Passage is that it can help us to feel more connected, to help communities function more effectively, and to bond more deeply with each other. And so that we can all recognize in each other, we're all here doing this dance of life together. And maybe we can form a deeper appreciation of what that means. And I'll give you, as we get into my talk here, some practical examples of that. But I wanted to, again, tell you sort of where I'm going with all of this. Well, and actually, here's another one. You know, how well do each of us understand our own lives, in a way? You know, how accurately do you think you can position where you are in your life right now? I think that's a really interesting question. And it's a question that Rites of Passage helps me to understand. That I can say with some clarity and definitiveness, I am in my eldership. And I got here, as I'll talk more about in a few minutes, partly due to the rite of passage that I went through from middle age into eldership by escorting my late wife to her death. That's the trial, that trial of fire, in a way, and the trial of tears that brought me across that threshold of understanding where I'm at in my life from middle age into eldership. So I think that, again, if we can begin to understand Rites of Passage as a framework for understanding our own lives, it'll make it easier for us to position ourselves in time, frankly. Not only within our own lives, but in that greater expanse of infinity called time. So I think understanding the Rites of Passage framework can help us in all these areas. And I tend to think of it as a possible universal field theory for understanding all forms of human behavior at every stage of life. Now, let me back up and define and explain what I mean by the term. So, the term Rites of Passage was first coined by a writer, a cultural anthropologist, Arnold van Gennep. In 1909, he published a book of the same name. He was born in Germany, he studied in France, and spent most of his life in Holland. And you might already be making connections in your own mind to Joseph Campbell's concept of the hero's journey. And if so, you're right on track. But I think one fundamental difference, at least as I understand it. You know, the hero's journey, as Campbell first talked about it, is basically positing each of us on this lifetime adventure called life, and from beginning to end, from birth to death. Rites of passage for me are what's the word I want? Bridges within that greater adventure. So they're transitions from different phases of different points in life, all encompassed by this one whole called the hero's journey. They're mini hero's journeys, if you want to call them that. So here's a definition from one of my teachers in this work, David Blumenkrantz, defining rite of passage. And you'll actually see this again very shortly in one of the films I want to show you, but it's worth repeating. And this definition of his was written about youth advancing from adolescence to young adulthood, but it really applies to all the different rites of passage. The degree to which a series of activities are a rite of passage is directly proportional to a community's acceptance and participation in the activities, and the youth's perception and belief in the activities as fulfilling their conscious and unconscious needs for transformative experiences. That is, a modern-day rite of passage is achieved when parents in the community create and participate in experiences that are perceived to be transformative by youth and in fact offer them increased status within the community and facilitate their healthy transition through adolescence. So that's one definition. Another one from one of my other great teachers, Angelise Arian, an amazing cultural anthropologist who just died a few years ago, lived in Marin. She basically said, oh, it's really simple, Frederick. It's really life skill acquisition, followed by a public demonstration of mastery. And that makes a lot of sense. So you might think about, well, a life skill. Okay, well, let's pull one somewhat at random. Patience. Well, maybe it's not so much at random because I struggle with that all the time. So let's say that a young person has problems with patience with his or her younger brother or sister. And one of the ways that a rite of passage can be proven effective is if we can see subsequent to that trial, is this person more patient or not? It's pretty simple. And then ideally, that person could even demonstrate their patience through some, publicly available, witnessable act. I'm a long-term meditator, so meditation comes right to mind for me. So if you take a 15-year-old adolescent, let's say, who's impatient and goes through a rite of passage, some learning, acquiring a skill of patience, maybe that young person can sit silently, not saying a word, in meditation for, let's say, an hour or more. That's proof of mastery. So my definition that I use, that maybe is also simple, but is it's an intentional transformational shift from one phase of life to another. Now, there are a minimum of 8 different passages in a normal human lifespan. Gestation to birth, baby to child, child to puberty, puberty to adolescence, adolescence to young adulthood to middle age to eldership, eldership to death. And it's important to remember that they don't necessarily all follow. so cleanly and clearly, one after the other. In fact, they can get enmeshed and you can leapfrog over one and maybe come back later to one. In fact, when I tell you my own story, that's in effect what I did. But that's, again, a sort of a normal human lifespan with a sort of a chronological trajectory. Now, there's also rites of passage that arise at any age from the normal course of human events. The death of someone close, a terminal illness diagnosis, the challenge of coming out as GLBTQ, serving in combat, becoming a refugee, even moving in with a new family or to a new place can be a rite of passage, absolutely. So, again, keep in mind that these don't necessarily occur linearly or even chronologically. And this example comes to mind because of the film that I'm working on now that I'll share with you in just a bit. What do you do with a 10-year-old who's facing a terminal illness? And I've been reflecting on that because in some ways I feel like it's entirely possible for a 10-year-old who's facing a terminal illness, who begins to understand how limited his or her life may be, that they can accelerate, in a sense, through some of these passages to accumulate some of this wisdom that their own lifespan won't afford them. It's also possible to say that they won't necessarily go through those passages in any sort of literal way, maybe not even a metaphorical way, but nonetheless, by facing death itself, will acquire what can be tremendous wisdom. And we all say, out of the mouths of babes, right? Well, I've already had the personal experience of knowing young people facing this kind of horror and being advanced with wisdom beyond even their own parents. Because at some point, in my experience, children will come to acceptance far quicker than parents will. So, broadly speaking, there's two structural forms that rites of passage can take. There's social constructions, those ceremonies, those rituals designed and implemented by communities to bequeath cultural knowledge and create security and sustainability. They're used as initiatory practices, social rituals to intentionally grow a person from one stage of life to the next. Because communities understand that their very survival at a certain level depends on affording people that transition. Because if they stay stuck in a given place in their own human development, they can be a danger to the community at large. They have to grow up. We all have to grow up, as painful as it is often, right? And that is one feature of rite of passage. It's painful. It's typically very painful. So the social constructions, we're all familiar with the ones that still exist. There's bar and bat mitzvah, Catholic confirmation. The Mormons do missionary service. So the young people, usually age 19, will go overseas and do mission work of a year, typically, sometimes two. Also, becoming an Eagle Scout. That can become a rite of passage, acquiring a lot of different skills, right? So this mode, these social inventions, have actually been the primary focus of my work. And my Veterans series actually focuses on, if you will, 5 different rites of passage modalities for returning veterans, hence the 5 films in the series. So along with the films and books that I've written, I've mostly focused on the rite of passage of adolescence to young adulthood. That was the one that really grabbed me when I first became aware of this subject matter. And you'll understand that better in a moment when I tell you a little bit about my own journey. But before I forget, I want to mention one resource that I've co-created, and it's called youthpassageways.org. And my vision for this nonprofit company was to become a worldwide clearinghouse of information for parents especially, but also for friends, neighbors, coaches, psychologists, counselors, anyone, to find resources so that a person could do something as simple as go to the website, again it's youthpassageways.org, type in a zip code, and you'd get a list of all of the initiatory and mentoring organizations that are in your area. And sometimes they're broken down by, they work just with boys, or they work just with girls, or sometimes with both. And all of that is all laid out and clear on the website. So that was my vision for it, and it's largely there now. So if you go to the site, you'll see that when I last looked, there were over 150 organizations worldwide doing this essential work. So I want to pause now, and I want to show you this 11-minute film called Rites of Passage, Mentoring the Future, about that passage from adolescence into young adulthood.
Empty your mind.
Wrong. That's the wrong one. It should be the first one on your list there. What is my file called? Okay. Yeah, that's the last one. Oh, the ROP short film Final Master, that's it.
Fifteen-year-old.
14-year-old, a 14-year-old and an 18-year-old
relish the destruction.
Teen and preteen drug and alcohol abuse.
Teenage bullying is an epidemic.
A small group of young punks.
Self-inducing abortions.
Series of murders and shootings.
It was mayhem.
Boys putting their own lives at risk.
15-year-old.
A 15-year-old.
This teenager
stole a car.
Gangs of young people. Teens in crisis.
Punks. It seemed like a war zone.
When a culture doesn't provide formal rites of passage or initiations, then you get usually destructive versions of it.
Maybe if we had other ways for kids to illustrate their adult-like qualities, that they wouldn't resort to these anti-social ones.
That's what gang activity is about. That's what vandalism and all of that kind of destruction is about how do I prove to the world that I'm here and that I'm a man, that I'm not a little kid anymore?
Young people at a certain age, it's very natural and important that they begin to challenge the values of their upbringing and of their culture, and to begin to look and go inward.
as communities do we respond to this need? Our social infrastructure has broken down. Half of our marriages fall apart. Everybody's working so hard that community is in fragments. How do we come together to provide this for young people?
Without a mentor as a companion, it won't work. Initiation depends on the generosity of the grown-ups, and the mentor has to be someone that's not going to abandon that boy.
When communities saw that this was happening in young people and they were beginning to rebel against the cultural values or the parent values, they knew, okay, this is good, something right is happening. They're ready and it's time for them to be initiated. And so for the health of the community and the health of the individual, they created rites of passage ceremonies.
The question then is, do we actually consecrate those markers? Do we celebrate those markers? Do we prepare our young people so that as they're moving from one stage to the next, that they understand that for every privilege, there is a corresponding responsibility. In absence of that, the day a child gets a driver's license is the day they steal their mom's car. The day they are old enough to buy alcohol is the day they get drunk. And on and on and on.
We are not addressing the needs of young people, and we have taken away, I think, from many of them, opportunities to participate meaningfully in the community. It deprives them of this chance to understand themselves better and to develop a sense of being important.
I don't see it as a failure of the young. I see it as a failure of the elders. So we as elders, we have responsibility. We have no choice but to speak, to teach, to show, and hope and bring the young along with us.
The human psyche so desperately needs ceremonial markings. It is like magic.
We'll find that the community will be safer. We'll find that kids will be less violent, less confused, less suicidal. These are better than meds, better than going to the prisons and juvenile facilities.
Every family unit, every community, every bigger clan, every village, city, town, state, whatever, need to figure out for their young people what works. How do you initiate?
Mother, father, guardians, I take my leave of you. I go away now to see a vision of my future. When I return, I will no longer be your child.
Start to think about what your mission is, what you want to do.
foot, step up and over it. You have arrived.
Initiation and mentorship that's helped me by realizing that it's okay to cry, not just in front of like men, but in front of women, without feeling like you're any less of a man.
After my initiation with women, every time I feel myself, like my foundation wavering, instead of needing to run to my husband or to these usual go-to people that are holding so much, it's my sisters, it's the women that can really hold me.
We also have to ask, what's the community losing by not engaging young people?
If the Creator put this person on the planet, we're supposed to nurture them to the point that we become recipients of the gift that they have. That's what Rites of Passage told me. Assist that person's growth so that when their gift is revealed to the world will benefit. That's an adult's responsibility.
Call you.
So the second structural form of rite of passage, those things that can arise at any age during the normal course of human events. Again, the death of someone close, a divorce, terminal illness diagnosis, the challenge of coming out, warfare, displacement. Let's call them life crises. So, again, most of my work has been around social constructions, communities coming together and either inventing or reinventing rites of passage particularly for young people, for adolescents. But well, and actually, before I go to the but, most of my everyday mentoring work interestingly enough, is not about that. It's about life crises. It's dealing with mentees who are coming up against all of the challenges that all of us come up against in our lives, in our normal human lives. So I want to read you a section from my book, Rites to a Good Life. The subtitle is Everyday Rituals of Healing and Transformation. And in it, there's a long Michael Meade quote, who you just saw. And you'll hear Michael himself differentiating between these two modalities, these social constructions versus life crises. And in fact, while I'm at it, let me also say that I see mentoring and initiation as two halves of one whole. Both are essential. And mentorship, I feel strongly, is essential before, during, and after any rite of passage, any initiation. And ideally, the two work together, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so you're lucky if you get one half of that equation. You're lucky if you have mentors in your life. You're lucky if you've actually had some kind of meaningful initiation. So here's me writing, and then this quote from Michael Meade. Mentors must always work with whatever rises in an initiate's life. Life itself will open the doorway to abundant lessons. Alert mentors often need do little but contain the initiate during her times of trial and help her tease out the valuable teachings embedded in the experience. So here's Michael Meade. It's like cooking, which is one of the images that used to be used in the South Sea Islands. The person is being cooked. And so I've heard people, modern people, say, well, I'm initiating myself. Well, that goes against the whole idea, because if I do it myself, I'm either going to have the temperature way too high or way too low. But if someone else is regulating the heat, they also have to know how hot it can go and how much a person can take. Social constructions. And so I think that makes it really difficult to just try it. So what I've been doing, and again, this is Michael speaking, what I've been doing is trying to find circumstances or notice circumstances where somebody is already in something initiatory. They are in such hot water that now you could bring them the understanding, to them, rather than bring them in and try to create the right kind of hot water. So you get the distinction that he's making between the two? For about end quote, so this is me again. For about 6 months, I was filming a Latino man in East Oakland. When I met him at age 18, Miguel already had a wonderful mentor. We filmed them together, and we filmed him experiencing a modern-day rite of passage with Melissa Michaels' powerful Golden Bridge program in Colorado. You just saw a couple shots of that in this. Prior to all that, when he was 11, on a street corner right in front of him, one of his friends shot and killed his best friend. The water was hot, boiling. What he needed then but didn't have was a mentor. He needed someone who could hold him through the course of healing, to help him process the trauma, all the anger, grief, shock, and fear. He needed an elder, a teacher, a coach, an uncle, a neighbor, someone to sign up, to step up and be a mentor, then and there, and say something like this to him. Now you're going through a rite of passage. You didn't ask for this. In many ways, you're too young, but here it is. The universe has thrust this upon you, and now death is here. You have lost your best friend. Even worse, you have seen another friend kill him. It is now your task to make sense of what does not make sense. I will be here with you. You will have to go through dark and unwanted emotions, anger, sadness, fear, maybe even shame. There is no way around them. You must go through them. I will be here to hold you, but I promise you this. If you go through them fully and continue to ask yourself all the hard and often unanswerable questions, you will come out of this with some gift, some new understanding of your life, some piece of gold that will serve you and those around you. It will serve you well for the rest of your life. That I promise. So that's mentorship. That's how mentors work with the challenges that life thrusts upon us. That's how, given proper support, each of us learns to process the horror and heartbreak that is our common human inheritance. So, as you heard, Michael Meade actually prefers working via mentorship through life crises that naturally, organically arise versus social construction. Fine, I've got no problem with that. One of the things you'll find in my work, if you dive into it, is that I'm completely agnostic about most of this stuff. I have no particular preference. All I care about is effectiveness. Who or what is effective? That's what matters to me. So another form of life crises, rites of passage, is veterans returning home from service. Now, whether they served in combat or not, in my experience, and now I've worked with about 150 vets over the last 6-7 years, the return necessitates a rite of passage. They have to transform, they have to transition from one identity, the identity of soldier, back into the identity of civilian. And the military is extremely good at doing the initial side of that, right? Taking civilians and turning them into soldiers. Boot camp is a highly effective process. We do not have reverse boot camp. We need reverse boot camp. And so, again, what I filmed were a number of people, institutions, small nonprofits who understand this and who are offering this return rite of passage to veterans. So let me just show you 5 minutes of one of the 5 films. And this film, every film is called Veterans Journey Home. This one is called Leaving It on the Land. It's a story about 12 veterans, all who struggle with suicidal ideation, who come together in the desert of eastern Washington for a rite of passage, a social construction. Maybe that's enough said.
It was very difficult to come back and start trying to fit in. I just stopped talking about it. It was a big, big change, and it was hard to start relating to anyone.
How's it going, Miss Susan? I think I have $3 I can give to you. You can get an all-day bus pass. All right, take care. I thought about suicide a few times. And one time, I put a round in the chamber. I was too scared to pull the trigger. So I just started drinking.
Sit with me. Oh. Sit. I have nightmares. I take bupropion and sertraline for the depression aspects, helping to control anger spikes and rage, hallucinations and delusions. Okay, good boy, good boy. Because that image, you know, taking a gun to my head, it just goes like a reel. I asked God, you know, please just kill me in a natural way so it wouldn't be a F.U. to the people, you know, like my parents, my sister, and anybody that actually has cared about me.
What color you got? Cherry. Orange. I'm a little Rubik's Cube.
We're gonna need forks for 5 people, so.
Yeah.
I struggle financially and I struggle mentally and I wanted it to end. I was hurting because my first wife, she left me. My oldest daughter had left, so it's like, there's no reason for me to even suck up good oxygen. I just want to go to sleep. You know, I want to sleep forever. You know, I don't want to wake up from this bad dream.
From the moment my feet hit the ground from Afghanistan, the only thing that I wanted to do was to take a fucking vacation. And not the type of vacation where the kids are on the shoulders with the Mickey Mouse on their hats on their heads and we're bobbing through Disneyland or Disney World. And not the type of vacation where there's a tour bus in the background of the fucking Grand Canyon. But the type of vacation where I could take my ass out on the fucking land and dig a hole and scream into it until I had put down every fucking thing that I needed to put down. A brother of mine said, Mark, it sounds like the vacation that you're talking about is a vision quest. And at the time I was resistant. I was like, what the fucking kind of hippie frou-frou bullshit, drum beating, magic woo-woo la-la stuff is a vision quest. He was telling me, Mark, there's a way that you can scream into a hole and put the shit down that you're carrying. And he said, indigenous peoples around the globe would welcome their warriors home with elders meeting them outside the village. And there was a certain series of steps and sequence that they would follow, a war detox, a spiritual cleansing that involved spending a time on the land as a community, and then solo with these things called self-generated ceremony, ways to mark those transitions, ways to dig a hole and put things down. In a spiritual way, ways to mark the ending, like cracking of a snake's skin and the shedding of those things that no longer serve. If I had not put my burdens down, including the identity that I had from military service, and mark and claim who I am today, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would have blown my brains out. And I can't help but believe that.
So that's the first 5 minutes of this 80-minute film, and the 4 people that you just met, 3 of them are participants in this rite of passage ritual, and then Mark, the 4th one, who you just heard, was one of the facilitators. So you might think that rite of passage life crises, like suicidal ideation, if they're not properly supported by mentors when they arise, necessitate some kind of entry into a social invention, a rite of passage social invention. And the group, by the way, that offers this particular one is called Veteran Rites, R-I-T-E-S, and they're based in Seattle. And they're doing about, I guess they're doing about 3 or 4 of these every year now. And typically with a group of about 10 to 12 veterans each time. So the key is we need someone, something to hold us through these furious passages. So we need containers, either of social invention or containers of elders, mentors, to hold us. So I want to just take a minute and wind back the clock a little bit here and tell you a little bit about my own story and how I got interested in these ideas. For me, it really began when I was 9 years old and my dad suddenly died. He had a heart attack and literally was out of my life forever without a goodbye or nothing. I went to bed one night, I got up in the morning, and he was dead and gone. So, on my way to the funeral, his younger brother, my Uncle Henry, showed up, and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Well, Freddie, you're the man of the house now." Now, you know, it's easy, of course, to snicker and dismiss a statement like that, and we all recognize how inappropriate a statement like that is these days. But you better believe that as a 9-year-old, I wanted very much to be a man, to be supportive of my mother, to be a man to support my older sister and my younger brother. But at 9 years old, what did I know about that? So I had a troubled adolescence, and only in perfect hindsight was I able to understand my life from that point on was grasping, however unconsciously, toward a workable image of mature masculinity that I could align my life with. I desperately wanted that. But my uncle didn't stick around to mentor me and show me. My father's colleagues at the University of Illinois didn't stick around to mentor and show me. Nobody from the community showed up to mentor and show me. And so, like many young people, when it came time for my need to be initiated from adolescence into young adulthood, no one was there. And so I unconsciously reached for those things that you just saw in the previous film: drinking, drugs, reckless driving, you name it, right? And again, I would argue that comes from a cellular need that each of us have as individuals when we're young to be initiated. But the community's not there to show us, to take us. And so we unconsciously reach for trials that will do the job, but they don't, all too often. So I spent my 20s trying to cobble together some image of mature masculinity. And I would take a little piece from a movie, and I would take a little piece from someone I met on the street, and I'd take a little piece from something I read, and I did my best to do this patchwork quilt. But I never had initiation and mentorship. Nobody showed up for me until 2 weeks prior to my 40th birthday. That weekend of October 1995, I went to a weekend workshop directed by a group called the Mankind Project. Some of you may know it. The workshop is called the New Warrior Training Adventure. It's just 48 hours. And for the first time in my life, over 60 men showed up for me. And it changed my life forever, both personally and professionally. So it's informed all of this work I've been doing since, all the film work and much of the writing, but also much of my personal life. I sit in a men's support circle to this day, 28 years later. 2 nights ago, I was in Auburn, California, sitting with my brothers in a circle. And even though I consider it my initiation from adolescence into young adulthood, here I was nearing 40, better late than never. One thing, too, that I only afterwards recognized was that it dovetailed perfectly with my takeaways from Hoop Dreams. Hoop Dreams we released 30 years ago, not only this month, this week, I think. We premiered the film in Sundance. And that film left me with a profound question. Who is there to support young men, adolescent boys, across this threshold into young adulthood, who's not out for their own ends? Because I don't know if any of you have seen the film or remember it, but there are parents around them and coaches, but everybody has an agenda, except for the moms. The moms are tried and true, and they want to see their boys grow into the best men they possibly can be. But everybody else seems to be working some angle. And I thought, what the hell? Who is doing this? Who is out there? So that film also dovetailed perfectly with my own initiation, which happened just a year later, and then spawned much of the work that came to follow. And we can talk about that maybe later if you want. So now I want to cut to 21 years later. So my wife, Tracy, is now dying from breast cancer at the age of 59. And most of my book, At Death Do Us Part, is about me escorting her to her death and my journey through the grief afterwards. And I want to read you just a very short excerpt from near the end of the book. And just because I love this poem so much, I'm going to include it. It's a beautiful poem here from Pablo Neruda. Rummaging through Tracy's files for some tax papers, this was after she had died, I found a copy of the program from our wedding ceremony, which was about 13 years earlier. It contained this poem from Pablo Neruda, which Tracy loved and insisted that we include in our wedding program. The prescience of it rocks me. Here's the poem. When I die, I want your hands on my eyes. I want the light and wheat of your beloved hands to pass their freshness over me once more. I want to feel the softness that changed my destiny. I want you to live while I wait for you asleep. I want your ears still to hear the wind. I want you to sniff the sea's aroma that we love together, to continue to walk on the sand we walk on. I want what I love to continue to live, and you whom I love and sang above everything else to continue to flourish full-flowered, so that you can reach everything my love directs you to, so that my shadow can travel along in your hair, so that everything can learn the reason for my song. I could never do justice to Tracy's life the way she could and did with her own memoir. But that certainly was much of the motivation behind my writing this book, teaching others the reason for her song. But this is my song now. I guess it had to be this way. I have to sing it, complete with cracked notes and throat-catching sobs, replete with all my faults and foibles. I didn't want to, but this is the rite of passage the universe saw fit to offer me, to shake me from my depression, to rattle my life into some new form, to pull me from my depths and force me into some new engagement with being. Or, as my Zen teacher, Jumpo Dennis Kelly, liked to say to me, to remove my head from my rectum. Do I feel more alive? I can't say that I do, but maybe that will come. Do I feel more dynamic somehow, like I have more agency? Truthfully, no. But what I do feel is that the blood that flows through my veins somehow has more potency. Somehow, the depth of the sorrow I carry has distilled and heightened the capability of each drop. Perhaps it can be of medicinal use. It might just prove to be an elixir for those similarly troubled. So that book, the process of writing that book, became part of my own rite of passage into eldership that I spoke of earlier. And in a sense, I didn't even realize I was going through it as it happened until I could actually turn around and through the experience of reading the book myself and reworking the book, understand it. And it was my editor who became one of my mentors in helping me shape the book so that it also came to be fundamentally about my rite of passage. So I've got to wrap up soon. I want to turn to the final rite of passage for all of us, living into dying, life into death. The documentary that I'm working on now is called It's Your Wonderful Life, and you'll see footage from a ceremony that we did for Tracy, my late wife, 12 days before she died. So I just want to show you this 2-minute teaser for this film that I'm in progress making right now.
Empty your mind of all thoughts.
Turn it down,
Let your
please.
heart be at peace.
We're here together to offer our love and support to Tracy.
Our students love you. You made a difference through your work, through how you live your life. You make a difference. My life is better because of you.
One of the things I loved about her from the moment I first met her was she knew who she was. She was very solid.
I've never met anyone who cared more about teaching. Never met anybody who cared more about inspiring others.
You've been a guide for me and a mentor for me.
I didn't know. What I remember is the conversations we would have about being mothers. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Absolutely, yes.
Immersed in the wonder of the now, you can deal with whatever life brings you.
Sometimes somebody comes into a group and you're like, oh damn, this will make a good friend. And that's how I felt.
Yeah, me too.
But I spoke to my therapist about it and we got a lot of work done.
I'm just so lucky to be part of your life and that you're part of my life. I just appreciate you, and love you, respect you, and thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I'll also make sure that your beloved is well cared for. And when death comes, you are ready.
So the idea is simple. Let's not wait until our loved ones are gone before we gather and say all these wonderful things about them. Let's do it to their faces before they pass. Sometimes they're called living wakes or living funerals. And I see them showing up a lot more readily in popular culture these days. I saw a film recently called Love at First Sight, which featured one, actually. It's just a simple romantic comedy, but they had a living funeral in it. Also, I think the book Tuesdays with Maury, some of you probably know that book, features one as well. So we want to film as many different modalities of this as we possibly can, with people of every age, every religion, every non-religion, whatever. We already have 2 stories in the can, and we're looking for more. So we're looking for dying people who are open to having life-honoring celebrations before they pass. And especially people who may fit one or more of these demographics. Men of any age, because men, in my experience, typically are in more denial than women about death. Any adult under 40. Children, 5 to 12. Obviously, only with their parents' permission. Teens, again, obviously only with their parents' permission. Military veterans of any age or gender, and that's just because at this point in my life, I just love veterans. And prisoners. Ideally, an elder, a respected community member in a prison who will finish out their life behind bars, likely has a terminal illness, and I want desperately to film a life-honoring celebration for somebody in that context, being celebrated and honored and loved on by their fellow prisoners. So please reach out to me if you have any leads, and if you, for whatever reason, can't talk to me right after the talk, then you can easily find me through warriorfilms.org. So we're hoping to finish the film within 2 years, but we'll see. So the subtitle of my book, as I mentioned, the second book, is called Everyday Rituals of Healing and Transformation. So how do we take this grand rite of passage idea and get there? We can do 2 things. One, we can enhance everyday rituals we already commonly observe. Birthdays, New Year's Eve, getting a first job, graduations, even weddings. In fact, my beloved Maggie and I were at a New Year's Eve party just, 2 weeks ago. And being the ritual lover guy that I am, I couldn't let the moment pass. So I suggested that we all sit together in a circle, and there were about 18 of us. And we did a simple ritual together. We did 2 rounds where everybody checked in. The first round was, what do you want to let go of from this year? And the second round, logically enough, is what do you want to let in? What do you want to be different about this coming year? And most of the people in the room didn't know each other before. And you would have been heartened to see strangers open their hearts so widely with each other. One woman was in tears instantly on the first round, saying, I want to let go of the fear that I have of my daughter, that she's going to die. And she's got a lot of physical challenges, her daughter does. Another woman checked in saying, I have struggled with self-hatred my entire life. And I can't say that I love myself, but I will say that I like myself. And that's huge progress for me. And we all cheered. Another example. So my friend I'll call Johnny turned 16. We recognized it was an important time to cut the umbilical ties that he still had to his single dad. Johnny needed more independence. He needed more space. And frankly, his dad needed to back off and give him some more room to find himself. So we did this beautiful ritual at a friend's house. There were about 9 of us, including his godmother, other friends that he'd known for a long time. We formed a circle. I invited the 2 of them into the circle, father and son. We took a long string, and I invited them each at each end to start turning and to just wrap themselves in that string, imagining all of the ties and all of the connections that they had with each other. So they each did that, and they were very well wrapped. And then I asked them, are you ready, each of you, to let go? Are you ready for Dad, for your son, to transition into a more independent life, to become his own man? And Johnny, are you ready to let your dad go and some of that reliance and dependence on him in order to be more fully independent yourself? They said yes. So I took a candle and I had them each hold the base of the candle. And I said, when you're ready, I want you to burn through this connection that you have to each other. They did that, and they unraveled all of the string, and we whooped and cheered and loved on them. So that's, again, a pretty simple example of something that any of us can do. You know, it's not hard to create rituals. All you need is attention and intention. What is the intention? What do we want to do here? Name it, bring it forth publicly. And attention, meaning stuff may show up that doesn't seem to fit, but it's here, so we got to work it in somehow. Could be weather, could be you can't light matches, the candle won't burn, whatever, right? So you got to pay attention too, be present. So imagine if every person's birthday, especially for young people, we did a simple ritual, asking them, what was the biggest life lesson you learned this year? What do you know to be true about yourself that you didn't know before? And then parents and friends spoke to the changes that they see in that young person. We also need to invent new rituals for transitions that need to be recognized and blessed, that typically we do not recognize, much less bless. Divorces, closing of a business, losing physical capacities, even dropping out of college. These things happen. These are normal parts of our human life. We can actually turn as friends and neighbors and community and recognize these moments in time and honor and bless the person who is going through them. So I'm already past time and getting into the weeds here, but failure, if you want to call it that, is normal a part of our human lives as anything else. And it's about time that we sort of brought it out of the shadows and brought it into everyday common recognition. Ultimately, all of this is about blessing. We've forgotten how to call out and name what it is that we see in each other that deserves recognition, that deserves honor. You know, our culture has no more seemingly sovereign capacity anymore, and that is a very important sovereign function, blessing. So my book, Rites to a Good Life, is full of very practical suggestions, that things that you can do for yourself, your family, your community. Each chapter ends with a bullet-pointed list of what you can do now. So I hope you understand and agree now that we have good reason to bother and care about utilizing this rite of passage framework. You know, I didn't mention, but it's true that people on the planet have been doing versions of this stuff for 50,000 years. And the wisdom that that our ancestors carried, we carry unconsciously through our unconscious understanding of archetypes, of energies that we may have no comprehension of consciously, but they're somewhere in there, and we can call them forth and activate them. So it's only in the last 200 years or so of industrial society that all of this has fallen by the wayside. So if you think anything that I'm doing is particularly original, I'm sorry to tell you you're wrong. It's not at all original. All I'm doing is just looking back over time and beginning to learn and understand about what was common practice on the planet for most of the time that human beings have walked on the planet. So this framework presents endless opportunities for us to drive the meaning and appreciation of our lives more deeply into our psyche. Consecrating life passages with public rituals are a necessity, not only for us as individuals to reach our greatest potential, to fully understand who we are and where we're going. It's to maximize the traction of our life. That's an expression I learned from Michael Meade too, the traction of our life. So many of us are off track. We don't have that traction and know it in our hearts. But it also cements community. It's the glue that bonds and holds us all together as community, and it points us toward a sustainable future. Because without them, we do not create generativity. Right? We do not. These are the practices, the cultural, ancestral wisdom passed down from generation to generation is what helps us understand where we are in the string of time. We can point, ideally, to fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers who had practices like these and bequeath them to us, pass them down to us. So this cultural knowledge is not lost and forgotten. And in fact, not only does it exist to be picked up and relearned, but we can also invent new forms and recreate stuff as we go to fit the modern times that we live in. I gotta stop. Thank you for your kind attention. So I'm sure you're bubbling over with questions. Do we have a hard stop that we have to get out of here like in 10 minutes or something?
Sort of, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But we have time for a question. So you spoke of creating rituals. What do you use as a source sometimes to invent a ritual like that, tie-in a rope around the two people?
Yeah.
Where do you get some of the ideas?
Well, that particular idea I got from one of my teachers in this work, a man from New Zealand, who basically used to implement practices like that in their own coming-of-age rituals for adolescence into young adulthood. But it's not required. So all you really need to do is have a willingness to be creative. And so if you recognize I mentioned divorces, maybe I'll just roll out this example a little bit. So what if we did gather as communities when we recognize that two people are getting a divorce and they have children? How about if we invited them into a circle of friends and neighbors, and we basically said the intention of this circle is about helping particularly you kids to understand what's happening and for you to recognize that you will not be alone during this passage, which is likely going to be painful as hell for you. And that's why we're here, to support you and to pledge our support to you so that we will not deny you. So anyway, I mean, I could go on and sort of roll this out as a kind of a thought experiment, but in my mind, it's a beautiful thing. So it just takes a willingness more than anything. And then attention and intention. Anybody else?
Any other questions? Okay, one other, call it a ritual or a tradition maybe. If you could help with the chairs, bring the chairs back. Help the Oddfellows out a lot. So.
Well, I'm happy to sign books too if you want to sign book. And actually, while I'm thinking of it too, a week from tonight, one of my films will be playing in Nevada City at the Onyx Theater, actually the Nevada Theater, downtown Nevada City, the big old theater. So come join us. It'll be a chance to see one of my films on the big screen. Thank you all again.
Let's go do some chair.